Okay, we still have some people joining from the waiting room, but I would like to welcome everyone to the first Echidna Scholars Dialogue, Ensuring Young Mothers Return, Remain, and Learn in School. My name is Jennifer O'Donoghue, and I'm a fellow at the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, as well as the coordinator of the Echidna Scholar Dialogue, the Echidna Global Scholars Program. Today, we're kicking off the Echidna Scholar Dialogues in Girls Education, a new initiative of the Echidna Scholar Alumni Network that aims to provide an ongoing space for girls' education researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and advocates to engage in evidence-informed conversation around pressing issues related to girls' education and gender equality in low and middle income countries. Our plan is to host these events quarterly, and our hope is that they be interactive sessions that bring together a mix of perspectives from across the world. One of the strengths of the Echidna Scholar Alumni Network is the diversity of experience and focus of our 33 alumni scholars working in 20 different countries. Another is the commitment that they demonstrate daily to the cause of improving the lives of girls and young women in and through education. Today, we hope to amplify that by joining with all of you to share what we have learned and to learn with you from the diversity of your own experiences and perspectives and the passion that you bring to our common cause. Our agenda for this half hour is as follows. First, you will hear from 4 of our Echidna scholars, Christine, Dasman, Maria Cristina, and Nasrin, who will set the stage for our conversation today, sharing with us the situation on the ground in Uganda, Jamaica, Mexico, and Bangladesh, respectively. We will break this up a bit with some Padlet exercises to bring you all into the conversation, and then we will move on to a Q&A session with the panelists, where they will be able to go a bit deeper in response to your questions. After this, we'll move it into breakout rooms to hear more from all of you, and then return to share some of the highlights of our conversations and close out the workshop together. I just want to remind you of a few housekeeping points before we get started. We are recording this session, and we will be posting it to the Echidna Scholars event page, where it will be available to the public. So please know that your participation in this workshop today will be public. We ask that you please keep yourself muted until the breakout room portion of the workshop. And if you want to ask a question, please type your name, your question, and who your question is for in the chat box. And if you want to comment on this conversation in social media, we invite you to do so using the hashtag Echidna Dialogues. And I think Ajiri will be pasting that hashtag into the chat for you so that you can just copy it from there if you want to. Before we move on to our first presentations, we'd like to get a better sense of who's in the room with us today. So to do that, we're going to do a few quick polls. And so the first poll question is just asking where you are joining us from today. What region of the world are you in? Is it early morning? Is it afternoon? Is it evening? Is it late night for you, where you are? So go ahead and let us know. And I will wait till we have about 70–75% of people responding and then share that with all of you. So we're getting there. We're at about 42, 45, 50. I apologize for my scratchy voice this morning. I'm recovering from being sick. Okay, people are continuing to respond in this poll. We'll take about another maybe 10 seconds. We're up to 65, getting close to that 75% mark. Okay, if you haven't answered yet, please do so now in the chat to let us know where you're joining us from. Okay, I think I will go ahead and end our poll now and share with you the results. It looks like we have, I think, the majority of people from this last category, which is the unnamed category. So most people, it seems, maybe don't want to put themselves into one of these other groups. But then we have about a quarter of us joining from Sub-Saharan Africa, also from South Asia, from Europe and Central Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's good to see that we have a good diversity geographically here in our conversation. And then want to share this second question with you, which is around how you would define your primary role in relation to today's topic. So I know that many of us play multiple roles, but here would ask that if you had to identify one that is your primary role, what would that be? So go ahead and take some time to answer that question for us quickly. And this one is moving up fast. We're already at 50%. So again, I'll wait till we get to about 75% before sharing. And it's great. I know you all can't see it moving here, but I can. It's great to see that we do have a good diversity of roles that people have in relation to the topic of teenage pregnancy. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll as well and share the results with you. And you can see that we do have, most of us here have a primary role as practitioners, but also a good portion of us are researchers, advocates and funders, and also something else. And so again, that is exactly what we're looking for in these conversations, is to bring together people from diverse perspectives and have this conversation together. So I will stop sharing that, and we will move on to our presentations. So our first panelist is joining us today from Uganda, Christine Apiot-Okuli, who is Education Program Manager at Cotton On Foundation.
Thank you, Jen. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
Sorry, welcome, Christine. Let me just read quickly your bio, and then I'll turn the mic over to you, just so that everyone has a better sense of where you're coming from. Christine has been working in education programming agencies over the past 20 years and has played a central role in placing critical gender and education issues on the policy agenda in Uganda. Her research as an Echidna Global Scholar at Brookings in 2016 and subsequent leadership was key to the adoption of national policy that supports senior women teachers as gender equity professionals in schools across the country. Christine works closely with the gender unit of the Ministry of Education and agencies like the Forum for African Women Educationalists, FAWE, Uganda, of which she is a member, to support and develop guidelines that mainstream gender issues into education nationally and regionally. She holds a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in development studies. Welcome, Christine, and now over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll be discussing increased teenage mothers in Uganda as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Teenage pregnancies have been a major health and social concern in Uganda for some time. Trends have showed that the percentages of young girls aged 15 to 19 who have given birth or who are pregnant with their first child was at around 31% in 2001, and it rose to 25% in 2006. It then went down a bit to 25% in 2011 and again back up in 2016 to 25%. But with the onset of the pandemic and when we had schools closed for 2 years in Uganda, the teenage pregnancies have rose once again to 31% and even probably more. What impacts these rates of teenage pregnancies in Uganda? You find that the proportion of teenage girls aged 15 to 19 who have begun childbearing decreases with increasing education and wealth. You'll find that approximately 47% are from peasant subsistence agricultural families and communities, and that 27% of the rural girls are more likely to have begun childbearing before their counterparts in urban centers, who are about at 19%. Teenage childbearing also varies according to regions in Uganda, where we have different tribes and cultures, with a percentage of 16 to 17 in the southwest and central region versus 30 to 31% in the north, central, east, and west, where bride price really matters. Childbearing also increases dramatically with age, rising from 3% in the girls of approximately 15 years to 54% at 19 years of age. Government has also done something to try and stop this trend. Parliament in 1990 passed a law to criminalize sexual relations between men and girls below the age of 18, making the offense of defilement at a maximum penalty of life imprisonment for the culprits. Government, through the Ministry of Education, has also put out a guideline that implements the roles and responsibilities of the senior man and senior woman in schools. This role particularly supports retention and completion, more so for the girls in schools. The most recent of the guidelines that the ministry has put out is one on prevention and management of the teenage pregnancies in the school setting. This particular guideline was revised to have the aspect of re-entry included. What are the barriers in policy and practice? You'll find that research done before the COVID pandemic showed that there were a number of teenage pregnancies due to economic, social, and cultural realities that have, for example, rendered the laws inapplicable. You find the culprit is able to negotiate with the victims' parents and get away with it. On the other hand, government and also the churches advocate for abstinence only and do not give a choice of birth control and condoms to the youth. With the onset of the pandemic, the already vulnerable girls' plight has expanded and deepened because of economic hardships. Some experts, on the other hand, blame this on the poor parental care and lack of it due to the erosion of the moral, cultural, and the social values in society. All is not lost. We still can support these girls. Government needs to be tighter on their responses to the law. We can support teenage mothers with education, skills development, health services through a number of youth programs. Government, on the other hand, can give the youth choices in terms of abstinence, birth control, and use of condoms. There also has to be a new shift in culture and religion to be more accommodative of the teenage mothers. But all in all, we have to work together as a community, get sensitization, and engage on various activities, take up our various roles and responsibilities towards the youth of this era. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Christine. That was really a comprehensive, but I would say brief, but comprehensive overview of some of the challenges and the current work that's being done in Uganda. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the question and answer period. I just want to encourage everyone to please drop any questions that you may have for Christine in the chat now and for our other presenters throughout the workshop. Our next presenter today joins us from Jamaica. Dasmond Kennedy's work spans approximately 30 years in the field of education, both at the classroom and policy levels. Her research and leadership has been instrumental in ensuring system-wide improvement in educational access, quality, equity, and inclusion in Jamaica. As an advocate for change and based on research she did at Brookings as an Echidna Global Scholar in 2017, Dasmond spearheaded the development of a national policy to support school-aged mothers through mentorships, scholarships, and the establishment of a 21st century daycare facility to enable quality care for the children of young mothers. After working as Assistant Chief Education Officer at the Ministry of Education and Youth in Jamaica, where she was responsible for education planning and development in 2020, Dasmond was named Acting Regional Director with administrative responsibilities for approximately 160 educational institutions and over 6,000 educators serving education from the pre-primary to secondary levels. Welcome, Dasmond.
Thank you, Jen. Good morning, all. I am Dasmond Kennedy, former Echidna Global Scholar from the 2017 cohort, and I focused on the reintegration of school-age mothers in the formal education system in Jamaica. It is somewhat preliminary to make a definitive statement on the trend and or impact of the pandemic on teenage pregnancy in Jamaica. For one, formal data is not yet available, but there are varied data sources to include data collected from schools and health centers, which need to be integrated to provide a definitive position. However, the data suggests prevalence in the 16 years and 17 to 9 age cohorts. And another mitigating factor is that online schooling has also masked the real numbers. The data, however, shows that girls from low socioeconomic background are mostly impacted. And here there is limited access to virtual classes. And there's also increased exposure to emotional and sexual abuse due to inadequate supervision. Well, what are the barriers to policies and practice? These indeed stand in the way of getting girls back in school and learning in spite of the fact that there is a national policy for their reintegration. There is reluctance of some school administrators, we call them principals in Jamaica, in readmitting adolescent mothers in the formal school system. And of course, they cite spacing limitation, which still remains a challenge today. There is inflexibility with formal admission period and when the girls are ready to be reintegrated. Formal admission period is normally between September and November. Sometimes the girls need to get back to school before that time. Removal from social protection program based on failure to update records to reflect that they are pregnant and lactating mothers is also a barrier. And finally, non-support on the part of some parents and their guardians remain a critical issue. But how do we support these girls in spite of all these many challenges here? Yes, the girls are still in need of adequate psychosocial and family support. And there is always a need for financial support. And we find that this to be a very pivotal issue. But in spite of support already being provided, there are still missing links. And these include ramping up positive parenting and child rearing practices, as well as lobbying for parenting and family support to engender empowerment of the young ladies. Counseling support, as frequently, the status of the girls is kept as a secret in their educational context. Nobody want anybody to know that they have these girls in their setting. And also childcare support when the girls return to school. Finally, there's a lack of interest on the part of some adolescent mothers to complete their educational pursuits in spite of available resources. I will say that while significant strides have been made to reintegrate school-age mothers in the formal school system in Jamaica, there remain some critical barriers to the success of many. These must be addressed with alacrity to ensure equitable access to quality education. I thank you.
Thank you, Dasmine. Again, I know these are quick sort of presentations through the work that you all have been doing and what you've been seeing on the ground. But I think you did a great job of highlighting for us some of the current issues that you and your colleagues in Jamaica are working on to ensure that girls can return to and learn in school. We're going to take a break from presentations for a second, and I would like to share my screen. We're going to try to use Padlet here, which I have to say for me is a new experience, so we'll see how we go. And let me just try to share my screen here quickly. I think that the link has been put into the chat, so if people could use that link in the chat to go to the Padlet. We have a few questions there on the Padlet that we would like to hear from all of you. So if you could first let us know what organization you're joining us from, so we can continue to get a sense of who all is in the room with us. And second, what is something from these first two presentations from the cases of Uganda or Jamaica that you heard that might really resonate with you, or sort of a key takeaway, something that you're thinking about after those first two presentations? That would be great. And then the third question here is about sharing resources. So if you have time now and you have sort of a resource that has been really important to you in terms of something you found helpful in thinking about your own work on this topic, and might be a book or a podcast, an article, a video, etc., something that you found helpful, that would be great. And we'll continue to try to add those resources as we go on. So just to get a look of where people are joining us from, we have people joining us from CARE International based in Timor-Leste and based in Portugal, from My Emotions Matter in Nepal, from Learning Support and Education, from Mentor Together. I recognize a lot of these organizations and can imagine the people who are here who are writing those. So welcome to all of you. Aflatoon, Oxfam, Casey Family Program, Save the Children, Cotton On, World Vision, International Youth Foundation, FAWE Uganda, UNICEF in the Eastern Caribbean. So again, we can really see the, from Thai Solarine, that's Adefunke, welcome. Glad to see, you know, such a broad representation of organizations and again, of countries around the world that are working. And in terms of thinking about what's resonating with people, you know, to understanding the context in Uganda, seeing similarities between what's happening in Jamaica and also in Timor-Leste. Similarities again with own countries, that girls are at risk for abuse in times of COVID-19, feeling the emotion and the lack of support for these young women. And I wonder what is known about their academic achievement in primary. That's something we can carry in maybe to the panelist conversation. And again, the similarities between Uganda and Jamaica and the same challenges continuously facing young girls despite all the work that has been undertaken. I think that is something that will continue to come out as we see the presentations. And for people who are putting resources, for example, who put statistics from our health department, it would be wonderful if people can share links with us as well, so that if other people can go in and be able to take a look at these resources as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. We'll return to the Padlet. Please feel free to continue writing in the Padlet at any time. And we're going to jump back over to our next presentations. But again, we'll return to that Padlet and use it at other moments throughout our workshop today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Maria Cristina Osorio Vasquez, who's joining us today from Mexico. As a professor and research fellow over the past 20 plus years, Maria Cristina has led several projects on women's economic empowerment and authored research papers focused on the advancement of women's and indigenous peoples' participation in education, business, and politics in Mexico as a way to create equal opportunity for all. Her research at Brookings as a 2017 Echidna Global Scholar focused on addressing the challenges and barriers to girls' education in Mexico, particularly for Mayan girls living in remote areas of the Yucatan Peninsula. Upon completion of her residency period at Brookings, she undertook a research project to reintegrate out-of-school adolescent Mayan girls into the national education system. She is currently working on developing strategies to promote school retention and reintegration of girls living in marginalized contexts in the Yucatan Peninsula, supported by the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Maria Cristina, over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to present my research advances. This research was developed with the support of Echidna Giving from 2018 to 2020 in Mayan communities in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. That means that during the last months of research, the COVID-19 pandemic had already started in the area. It was found that in rural communities, adolescent girls face challenges related to high levels of poverty, distance from urban centers, gender norms, and linguistic barriers. In this region, gender norms limit or prevent discussion of sexuality in the family, leaving girls unprotected against non-consensual sexual relations, sexually transmitted diseases, and early pregnancies. In some families prevails domestic violence, alcohol and drug addiction, which drive adolescent girls to run away from home. Some of the girls who participated in this project were rejected by teachers for having children or living with their boyfriends. They were told that they were a bad influence on the girls attending the school, even though they were minors and they had not completed basic education. In the health services, contraceptive methods are distributed freely. However, in small communities, adolescent girls do not request them due to the fear that their parents will find out that they are sexually active. It should be mentioned that there are government support programs for girls in these communities to continue studying. However, the community's channels are not appropriate to the context. When a girl begins her sexual life or gets pregnant before marriage, in some cases, the perception of shame is so strong in these communities that it drives parents to expel them from their homes as a punishment. When this happens, it is very difficult for the girls to continue studying, since the shelters and daycare centers are available in the cities. As a society, we need to accept that sexual activity initiates during adolescence in Mexico, not only in the city, but also in rural communities. Therefore, it is imperative to reinforce sex education at school to complement the information received at home. It is important to promote the support that girls should receive from their families, partners, teachers, and community when facing challenges at such a young age. Finally, I would like to thank Echidna Giving and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Cristina, again for, I know these are quick presentations, but really providing us a look into some of the challenges, but also the important work that you've been involved with and others to support young mothers in Mexico. And we have some great questions coming in the chat, and just want to remind everyone again, please drop any questions that you have. We have one more presentation and then we'll move on to the question and answer period. So it's great if you can drop in your questions now. Our final presenter joins us today, this evening, that is for her, from Bangladesh. Nasrin Siddiqa has worked for 22 years in schools and NGOs to promote gender equity and access to quality education in Bangladesh, focusing on barriers to girls' education, such as child marriage and gender violence. In 2010, Nasrin founded the Education and Cultural Society, ECS, where she currently serves as president and executive director. ECS's flagship project to expand rural girls' access to STEM education has established hundreds of STEM clubs in rural Bangladeshi schools and trained nearly 2,000 teachers to create gender-sensitive classroom environments. As an Echidna Global Scholar in 2019, Nasrin used this practical experience to document the specific barriers to STEM education faced by rural girls. Nasrin has been recognized by the US Department of State and the Global Digital Annual Women's Economic Forum, among others, for her work with girls' STEM education. She also serves as a consultant for the South Asia chapter of the World Bank. Nasrin, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone from around the world. So you can see a photo here. This is not a photo from Google. She is Shonali. She used to attend one of the learning center of my NGO in Bangladesh, where underprivileged children are getting support for food, education, rights against violence, and others. During this time of lockdown for COVID-19 pandemic, her poor mother was bound to marry off this 13-year-old daughter, and now she is holding her baby daughter, leaving school along with all her hopes. It is a matter of great shock and failure that we could not rescue thousands of girls from dropout and due to this unprecedented pandemic, along with other existing barriers. So these children like Shonali should deter. Yes, we can see here that we are finding multidisciplinary effect of COVID and need more extensive deep-rooted research to get the real scenario. COVID-19 has a significant implication on livelihoods of women and transgender people in Bangladesh, as 91.8% of the total employment of women is in the informal sectors. Domestic workers, owners, workers in medium and small enterprises, daily laborers, street vendors, cleaners, and most of the ready-made garment industry sector, this is the most important formal sector, they had left their job already. And many are returning, but this is a great loss. And all fall on girls' education. According to the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, pre-COVID-19 women on average performing 3.43%, 40 times more unpaid domestic work than men. The closure of schools and the entire family staying at home has further exacerbated the burden of unpaid care work on women. UNICEF representative in Bangladesh said, despite significant progress in recent years, Bangladesh has the 4th highest prevalence of child marriage in the world. COVID-19 compounds the difficulties facing millions of girls. School closure, isolation from friends and support networks, and rising poverty places girls at heightened risk of child marriage. So girls should remain in school after returning. In order to check long-term dropout, government should collect gender disaggregated data on real enrollment and work with schools to develop action plans to bring back the girls to education. While planning for the resumption of schools, government and NGOs and other sectors and school-level stakeholders should identify and remove any regression policies that may discriminate against girls, such as not allowing married and pregnant girls to school. To support re-enrollment, ministries of health education should work together and communicate well-defined timelines with clear benchmark and standards to reopen schools. Special financial support program is needed. Studies shows that cash transfer, community education program, and waiving examination fees are effective strategies for encouraging girls re-enrollment and staying at school. So in this slide, we can see a Bangladeshi teacher takes care of a newborn child while her teenage mother completes her examination. We salute these teachers, and they are also suffering after this COVID-19 for different reasons. This might be an immediate or emergency solution, but it is not the sustainable solution. So what we need? We need alternative pathways like informal education, evening schools, skill development centers for these dropout girls. STEM squad D, science, technology, engineering, mathematics education, along with manufacturing and design could be time-worthy initiative for them. Technical and vocational education and training is always a proven medium of alternative education, which can ensure and support these girls to get sustainable jobs. Learning with earning, NGOs like mine, ECS is operating different projects where these girls are learning different skills, which will help them to earn and support their families in the near future. So skill-based education is also required, and so that the girls and other children, they can face the fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence challenge in future. So we need to rethink, relearn, and reunite with a suitable, sustainable, and safe education system for all children, especially for girls, and more specifically for the vulnerable girls immediately. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nasrin, again, for providing us with that quick, but I think very clear on the ground perspective of what you're seeing in terms of the challenges, but also the opportunities. And again, the work that you've been doing with young girls in Bangladesh. So at this point, that's the end of our quick presentations that we wanted to serve as sort of the basis for the rest of our conversation today. I'd like to give a quick virtual round of applause to all of our presenters for that quick but clear grounding that they've given us. And once again, would like us to return to our Padlet, where we have a few other questions. So again, if people have resources, it's great to see that there are people have been sharing some resources. The Right to Education Index is here, statistics, various strategies can be utilized. Again, if you have resources, anything you've read, watched, listened to that has impacted your thinking, you could put them in here. It looks like maybe this is a resource as well from the Casey Foundation. And so I wanted to move to this question around, what resonates with you from the second round of presentations. Now we've heard from 4 different countries, 4 different contexts. Are there things that people feel like are really coming out strongly for them from these 4 presentations? What would be some of those key takeaways that you would include there? And I'm just gonna, in the meantime, go back to see some of these from the last round of presentations. People also talked about the need to reinforce policies to minimize victimization of girls in school. That in Nigeria, someone's writing that there's no readmission policy and stigmatization is a major problem. High cases of school dropout due to learner pregnancy in Namibia, similarity with the Nepali context. So again, we're hearing from different contexts that are facing some of the same challenges, and we have a mixture, I think, of countries where there are not enough policies, and other countries where there are policies, but maybe the putting that policy into practice and having effective implementation of that policy is where the challenge is, and there's a long way to go towards effective change, and the importance of supporting juvenile mothers again. Okay, the need for gender-based violence mitigation. very true. I think something that several of the presenters have mentioned, but that we know is the case, is that often sexual violence is the cause, and sexual abuse is the cause of teenage pregnancy in many contexts. And yes, definitely agree on this continued need for gender disaggregated data. So I'm again going to stop sharing the Padlet, but please feel free to drop in your comments and thoughts on the Padlet at any time, and would now like to move on to the question and answer period. So here we have, again, our 4 presenters representing 4 different contexts and having worked in 4 different contexts. And in looking through some of the questions in the chat and also the comments on the Padlet, one of the main questions, I think, is in regards to policy. So I think, we have sort of, on the one hand, you spoke a bit, I think several of you, to different policies that do exist to support young mothers in terms of their continuation with their schooling. But there's some questions around what is actively happening. So what measures are governments actually taking to make sure that that policy or those guidelines, in the case of Uganda, are moved into practice? And then a question around how can practitioners reinforce those policies? So maybe Christine, since one of these questions was directed specifically to you, we could start with you. And in particular, if you could talk around, how are the guidelines in Uganda being put into practice? And so what types of measures is government, but also practitioners and the practitioner community taking to ensure that these guidelines are followed?
Thank you, Jen. Yes, indeed, the re-entry guideline has been well circulated. At least all the stakeholders who directly are going to support this particular re-entry program have put in all efforts to ensure that all the processes are in place up to the school level to support these girls come back into school. But just as everybody else is pointing out, yes, the girls can come back into school, but there are very many other issues that will not make them still come back into school. The stigma, yes, is still there, but one of the things that has really come out so glaringly is where will they put the infants when they come back to school. You find that there are parents who would be the first people to take up these infants are still toiling to fend for the family, and an infant then would cause them to have to stay back at home. So there's still some unanswered questions to these policies that need to be ironed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Would another of our panelists like to jump in on the same question around, what do you see that has been actively happening in terms of policy implementation and effective policy implementation? And how can practitioners get involved in that in particular?
Okay. If I may, Jen, thank you for that question. I must say that the policy is well written. The document is there, yes, and implementation is very much underway. But then when it gets down to the different contextual framework, then therein lies the challenge. For example, yes, the scope is there for girls to return to school, but Jamaica is a highly religious country, and many of our institutions, educational institutions, were founded by private partners who are themselves high religious persons. So in terms of having the status quo being upheld in institution, there are tight rules. You may hear me refer to the fact that even though the scope is available for the girls to return to the school system, they are in the schools, and we would have provided the support of the guidance counselors and the social workers to enable their educational continuation. But many of the times, these practitioners are not aware that the girls are there. They don't know who they are because they are kept under a protective shield based on the fact of fear that if other girls know who they are, then there might be some complaining to their parents, and then you'll have parents calling us at the regional office to report and to put out a case that how is it that they could invest in their daughters to go to a particular school, and yet we have other persons within the same space who do not hold the same type of value. So that is it is not even political, but it is more religious in my case. And as such, you'll find that the girls are not benefiting from the supports that are put in school for their fulfillment. However, all is not lost, because within the regional authorities, we have 7 in Jamaica, and I head one. We have guidance counselors who are outfitted in those centers, and they take an active role in visiting the girls when they are being reintegrated in their centers. They provided the requisite psychosocial support. They assist them with funding and whatever they need, because even in the pandemic period, my guidance counseling unit would have sourced technological devices to ensure that the girls could benefit. But this is not widespread. But you'd really want to have a groundswell of all these activities throughout the country. But how do you break down the stigmatization barrier is a key issue.
Great, thank you, Jasmine. And actually, I would like to build off of the last part of what you said, because we do have a question that came in around that as well. I think all of you talked about sort of the stigma issue and the sort of social norms and discrimination that can come with teenage pregnancy. So the question we have here is, how do you help young mothers deal with stigmatization and self-worth as they go back to school and when their friends and others may have moved on, for example? So maybe Maria Cristina, would you like to start off with this question? I know some of the work that you've been done has been specifically on trying to get those social supports in place for young mothers.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Yes, it is very hard because, like I said before, if they get pregnant, they're going to be rejected by the family. And that is the time when they really need support. So we need to change this perception of shame, and we need to make them feel acceptance, that it is going to be all right, that they are going to have a future. That is really important.
And are there ways that you found to change that? Some of the peer-to-peer work that you've been following?
Well, that was really interesting because in the project, what I saw was that the girls that had support from their partners or family members, they finished secondary school, even with babies. But it was really important to have support of one member of the family, mostly the mother, and also, if possible, the partner, even if the partner is an adolescent as well. But yes, I think that some of the studies that they were made in Harvard School of Education are related to that, the importance of have a figure of support in your life when you are going through difficult experiences in life.
Thank you. Nasrin, would you like to jump in here at this point and talk about this work around stigma and social norms?
Yeah, Jen. Sure, thank you. That already UNICEF has declared this is as a generation catastrophe when the school reopened after 18 months in Bangladesh, and in many parts of the world the situation is almost like that. So many girls already lost their parents also due to this COVID-19. In my learning center, I know some of them that are already they have lost their parents, and it is impossible for them to go back. That's why we can see millions of children are now engaged with child labor, and girls are, especially in Bangladesh, they are engaged with work of as housemaid. And we don't have any data or report that how many of them already left and who are they. So actually, at first, we all need to agree with this, that there is a catastrophe. Something happened, then we can move forward. If we think that like previously, that's everything is okay, if we just show some data and progress that we did this, and the girls are rate enrollment rate, but we have to know the hidden numbers, the real root cause problems where it is. And recently I found that some of the girls, they're really afraid of. One of the girls, she is in grade 9. After the school opening up, after near about 2 years, she's so afraid of returning to school. She said that I can't adjust with the school. I can't adjust with the mathematics, English, and other subjects. So I won't be able to go back to the school. So that's why we are trying to support the mother who are widow or divorcee, or that these young mothers with the small entrepreneurship business and other things, so that if they can get minimum support to run their family, so that they can send their children to school. So we need more effort to check. Thank you, Jim.
Great, thank you. I think, you know, both what you and Maria Cristina both spoke to is that need to not only support the girls themselves, but also their families and others who are in their context, so that they can support them better, right? And try to do some of that work that is related to that sort of social stigma in particular, and the need for social support. I want to move on to another question here that we had around you know, girls' access to comprehensive sex education. And so there's a question, you know, if each of you could address efforts that you've seen to provide adolescents with comprehensive sex education, and whether, you know, there's been sort of pushback against that, and how that has played out in different contexts. And I would just add into this question that, you know, with COVID, one of the findings and one of the challenges has really been that a lot of those types of supports and access to comprehensive sex education and others has been interrupted because of the pandemic. But has the pandemic also opened up new opportunities, you know, trying to look on the bright side a little bit. So maybe if each of you could talk about what you've seen in your countries in terms of comprehensive sex education in this past year or so, maybe, and what you think might be done. What are the possibilities moving forward? Who would like to start?
Yeah.
Okay, Maria Cristina.
Again, in rural communities, it is also like, it is not existent inside the family. It is very rooted in cultural norms. So even that it is happening, like I said in my presentation, like they begin to have sex around adolescents, around 15 years old. But even so, their parents, they don't talk about it. So it is only in the school that girls could have some information. But even so, like in urban cities, it's like it is more common to see this kind of conversation and to have this open guidance in the school. But in rural communities, it's also like non-existent. So if the girl is not having the right information at home, and at the school is just insufficient, how she's going to know how to take care of herself. They only rely in another gear, in a partner, that they don't have enough information. So it is an issue because it is happening, but it's like nobody wants to talk about it in rural communities. It is again this perception of shame, but the reality is that if the girl don't have the information, like she's going to be pregnant and then she's going to reject the school, and how we're going to solve this issue.
Yeah. And I would also add, just jump in here, that part of the challenge in Mexico in particular is that parents are being given the choice of whether their children participate in comprehensive sex education, right? So even when it's part of the national curriculum, parents can choose for their families to opt out of that, which adds an additional complication, right, in terms of young people's rights. Does anyone else want to jump in around this question?
I can come in, Jen. I endorse some of the things that Christina would have mentioned. And as you rightly say, and within our context, sexual education is integrated in the curriculum, as well as the the whole widening of platform for persons to access, knowledge about sexual education. But then again, it comes down again to the point where the rubber hits the road, when the girl has to make the right decision. How do you strengthen that? And more so in context where a girl needs to receive something from somebody to maintain survival. And then that person now automatically becomes, the person who may lead that young miss into compromising behavior. We do have an issue of parental management too, and parental guidance, because if we take it now to a single family household headed by a mother, and it can also be headed by a father, if there's not adequate supervision for that girl, then the distraction would come about. We, in Jamaica here, we have what we called a yard-to-yard initiative. And this came out of the fact that during the pandemic, we were unable to locate a number of our students. And then when we started opening up school, we started collecting data on a weekly basis. And we look at it and we're able to say how many children are still missing. And so the ministry invested in social workers, and we deployed these persons into communities. And it was found that many of the girls have not been able to return to school because they got pregnant. Yeah, and this is evident. So it's really holding on tightly to the social issues, which is going to take a whole lot of magnanimous work to get down to the level where you meet that particular girl who is really in need. And sometimes it's not always easy. So this is going to take a societal involvement down to the church's level, down to the community level. And if we get to the stage where everybody looks out for a girl, then that's where we'll find the greater impact happening. But we have become so modernized in society. We tend to stay more in our homes and use the media. So we're not actually drilling down into communities to see who needs help. And that's where society would have taken us at this point.
Great, thank you. There's so many great questions, and I know that all of you have more that you want to say. I'm going to move us towards the breakout room portion now, in particular, because I think many people are putting in the chat ideas that they have as well. And so this seems like a perfect opportunity and perfect point at which to open the conversation and hear from and learn from the experiences of others who are on this call with us today. And in particular, Dasmine, building off of the last point that you made there, how can we build a sort of culture of support for all young people, but in relation to the topic that we're discussing today, in particular around young parents, really, because someone else had mentioned the role of boys and men in this too. And so how can we support young people in this way and in this time, and make schools welcoming places and places where people are able to be themselves. So I'm going to ask for help to move us all into the breakout rooms now. Each breakout room will have a facilitator who will be one of the 5 of us who've been moderating and presenting today. And we'll just be there to help facilitate the conversation. And in addition to introducing yourselves in the breakout rooms, we have some questions for all of you that we'd like to use to help to steer the conversation. So I think our breakout rooms are underway, coming soon, and we'll have about 20 minutes or so to work together in those breakout room spaces. As we did in our session, we got sort of—
This meeting is being recorded.
Of talking still. So unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to have the full discussion that we would like to have, but I think that was really a first look, a first beginning of the conversation. And really that's what this dialogue is all about, is starting the conversation and getting people together who are interested and who are working on this topic and who have experience and have great ideas, and how do we lift up those great ideas and spread them around the world. And that's part of the conversation, the ongoing conversation that we hope that we'll all be able to have. We also worked on a collective document that will be part of the Padlet, and you'll be able to see that as well on the Padlet. And I think that Anaris just shared with us the link to that collective document in the chat as well. So that's, you know, a beginning way again to start to capture some of the ideas and the work experiences and the sort of thoughts and issues that everyone had. But at this point, I'd like to open the floor for our volunteer reporters to share some of the big picture ideas that people talked about in the breakout rooms. And we'll go in order of numbers here. So we'll start with group one. So if the reporter from group one could unmute themselves and in about 2 minutes or less, briefly share a synthesis of the key points that you talked about in your discussion, that'd be great. So who is our group one reporter?
Hi, I am the group. I guess we
Luana.
were in breakout. Yeah, hi. So yeah, what we talked about basically was about the idea that in some countries, like this, particularly this issue has been in a shadow, even though that a lot of issues has been there, and we talk about gender, we talk about adolescent girls' education, but then somehow we have missed talking about it. And we also experience, in some countries, we also experience a lot of female students dropping out. In terms of like the challenges and also the solutions, there was a discussion regarding that there are laws and policies when it comes to sexual and reproductive health education, but then because of the lack of practical measures that we have not been able to figure out. For example, the infrastructure related to toilets. Like even if the girls are pregnant, then we are not being able to ensure that how they would be able to like go to the other problems, and other problems related to the reinforcement of laws and stigmatization is also one of the and start talking about problems, it will be very late, and the consequences are about.
Oh no, Luana, I think we're losing the connection, unfortunately. So I think we will move on to group two and hope that Boana is able to connect back with us soon. Is there a reporter for group two?
Yeah, sure, Jennifer. I'll be summarizing our discussions in group two. What we deliberated on. I'm Doreen. I'm from Building Tomorrow. That is, we work in Uganda. So far, like Anne was actually, Shelna was telling us, this is we are in shadows trying to see how best mother would be helped. So we talked of what really happened in the 2 years pandemic lockdown, where we see perpetuators, abusers being those people these mothers were looking up to. So these are the issues we experienced here. We looked at these mothers being used for child labor, as they were redundant, and in the 2 years lockdown, they were taken up to do work, to do labor at home. This is how they came across being challenged with the experience of getting pregnant. We looked at the pressure and the idleness at home still cause the factors to them getting pregnant, and also looking at reinforcement of these policies. Of course, we have the policies in place, we have the guidelines, but how they are being reinforced, and also the mindset, the change in the mindsets of the schools where these girls are going to be taken back to school. One of our group members in Nigeria had to submit that for them, they don't even have the re-entry policy on these girls. So they are not given a chance to return to school. And yet here in Uganda, the policy is there, but also the implementation of it still has a gap and a question. So we looked at loss of interest of these girls also to return to school. Some of them don't want to go back to school. They've lost it. They want to go and start doing small enterprises, start entering into business and the economic world. So we looked at other factors that are hindering this. We looked at some of which is we can categorize in the religious aspect, whereby we had somewhere in Uganda, one of our religious leaders saying we are not going to allow these girls back to school. What impact will they give to other fellow girls who did not conceive during the lockdown? So all those are barriers. And also, like we said, economic factor, poverty, all these things come into play to really give a stop to these girls returning to school. And how can we support this? How can we come out as practitioners to support this? We looked at having policies available, but how are we going to scale them up? How are we going to make them effective? And we looked at having parents involved. If we have any way of involving them, we can still give them financial trainings, economic trainings to support, to be self-sustaining and support these teen mothers. And also looking up to these community structures and maybe reinforcing, trying to work in collaboration with our local governments here to see that these policies are put in place and they function. So that is that could be a summary of what our breakout room in 2 we discussed. Yeah, I submit. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Doreen. So we'll move on to group 3, and again, I'll try to be brief, and also if you could try to build off of what you've heard from others, so so we don't repeat and are building the story to be a bit bigger. So reporter from group 3, if you want to unmute yourself and come into the conversation here, and again, the brief version of what you talked about and something that you want to add to the conversation about what has already been shared. Do we have a reporter for group 3?
No, Jen, we don't have it. But I can read a little bit if you want. Because okay. If someone would like to do it as well, it's fine.
But why don't we, Maria Cristina, I'm going to move on to group 4 so that we can hear from group 4, and then we'll come back to you, just because I want to make sure that we have other voices in the conversation. Okay, so reporter from group 4, do we have a reporter from group 4?
We do. Hi, everyone. Zach Fowler here. There's a lot of things that have been said well already, so we won't belabor those points too much. I think a few key takeaways, obviously major impact on girls dropout and attrition related to COVID. I think one of the things that all of us have seen is a bit of a soul searching happening between different NGOs and institutions, saying, are the participants that we're working with, the communities that we're working with, truly as resilient to a crisis like this as we would want them to be? And if not, is there something we can be doing programmatically in the advocacy realm, in the policy realm? What could we be doing better? Because this did hit a number of regions, communities, countries, even significantly. And you have to wonder if the current practices are working, if the effect was so dramatic. I think something else we talked about too is that there are a number of different barriers. I won't go into them again. I think people have covered that well. But one thing to point out about the barriers is that they are inherently holistic in nature. It's not just one thing, right? It's layers. We know this well. I think to have a truly effective intervention or a truly effective support system, you need to be thinking systematically. You need to be thinking holistically. You need to be thinking about the whole girl approach. And part of that also means that as we continue to investigate the barriers to school return, we need to be sourcing information from girls who are attempting a return themselves. So, population level data is very important, but so is individual qualitative data. If we can get that from girls and get their own stories and voices, that's going to be key for us going forward to understand what are the issues from the people on the front lines, so to speak. And then lastly, in terms of what else is needed, I think one of the themes for us was really consistency. There are some national policies in some countries, and some other countries are looking for additional support from the government, additional support from policy. But I think in many contexts, even if there is a national policy supporting pregnant mothers' return to school, there's not consistency in implementation or in dissemination of that policy across the country. So you might see strong implementation in the country's capital, but you might see more diffuse dissemination in smaller communities and the kind of fringe of the country. And that's something for us to really think about. I think also there's consistency in messaging between different programs. Again, going back to the holistic issue, I shared an example of a family who was confused about the push to re-enroll pregnant mothers because they were also receiving information saying that pregnant mothers should stay home for a certain amount of time to finish breastfeeding and ensure the nutritional health of the infant. And so they're confused because they're getting the message of quickly get the girl back to school, but also don't quickly return the girl to school. So the more holistically we can think about our approaches to why we're returning girls, when we return girls, under what circumstances, the better off we'll be. And a major part of that holistic look is going to be childcare. That's a major theme for all of us. I just wanted to name that because it came up again and again in our group. So quick overview there, but that's a summary of what we were talking about in room 4.
That's great. Thank you, Zach. So we'll move to room 5. And I know from room 5 that Suman is our reporter. So Suman would ask you to, again, try to mention new things. So not to repeat what we've been saying already, but to add some of the new points that we discussed in our room.
Yes, absolutely. Here I go. I'll shoot. I'm not going to talk about the issues because most of the issues seem to be some similar on board, but just that issue about girls getting raped by male teachers was brought in and was very significant to understand. And that's why the necessity of protecting girls from this kind of an abuse and possibly looking for legal system was something that we all discussed. There were a few things around looking at policy, looking at interventions, etc. But holistically, I would say that the consensus was that one, you need to get higher leadership involved. So it's just not policy, but you need to get a commitment from the higher leadership. And that's what was shared by Nima from our group. And then once you have a policy, it's not enough. Timur said that it's important that implementation is very, very important. Just to have a policy in black and white, and I can say the same for Sierra Leone, is not enough, but you need to have a very good implementation plan. The third thing is that you need to build agency, because it's not enough only to have inputs or interventions, but you also need to empower girl child, considering that there is a data which is available for many countries. I can speak for Sierra Leone, where there's very high maternal mortality, pregnancy and then mortality rates. So not only related to that, but all the other things. One thing which I missed out speaking while I was talking is looking at interventions in the same geography. While we're talking about the girl child, it's important whether it is intersectoral health, hygiene, nutrition, learning, everything needs to be brought together, not thinking that this is intervention only for teenage pregnant girls, but all girls together. So it also acts as a intervention to prevention to pregnancy, and not only looking at what to do once they are there. So that was mostly we had discussion in our group. Over and out from my side.
Thank you, Suman. And thank you, everyone. I think, we always find in these conversations that we don't have enough time. And so we're quickly approaching the hour. I want to just quickly share my screen and show everyone here that on our Padlet, we have the document, which is the Google Drive document that we were using in all of the breakout rooms, where you will be able to go in and open this up and see, what were those notes from the discussions in each of the groups. So I encourage everyone to go in there and take a look to see, what ideas, what were people talking about. As always, the report back gives us sort of the high level summary, but we can get some of those details from that document. And then, great, I'm so happy to see that people have been putting in questions that they still have. We also have a spot here for ideas for action that people are taking with them. I know, for example, that Jillian has been looking for someone who's working on this issue in Ghana. So if you have a specific request, for example, maybe you want to add that there, and this could become a way that you could link up with other people. So it would be great if people could continue to use this Padlet. We will be sending out the link to everyone as well for this Padlet so that we can continue to have this as a space. If you have other resources, it's great to see that people have been sharing more resources here. If you have other resources that you want to add, that would be wonderful. As we say, our hope here was really to begin a conversation and to get people together who are interested and who are working on this topic sorry, got confused by technology for a second, to come together and work on this. It looks like something else is being, Suman, I think, is that Suman's? Oh no, Shayan, someone else's screen. Okay. Thank you. We had technology on our side until the very end. And then the last thing, just to say before we sign off here, is that, as I said, this is a new series, these Echidna Global Scholar Dialogues, and part of the idea is really to build a community or to continue to strengthen our community of global actors who are working on these issues. So we have a space where we can come together and have this type of conversation. We're learning and we want to learn from all of you and with all of you. So we were also going to ask if you could help us with a short evaluation. We will put the link. I see Ajiri has already put the link into the chat. So it would be wonderful if you could it will probably take about 2 minutes to fill out that evaluation. And we will also be emailing it to you. We understand that maybe you're busy now, but if you have time later, that would be wonderful. And just want to close by saying that, we really hope that this space has allowed you to engage with some of the evidence, experiences, and ideas about how to ensure that all girls, and especially those who may become pregnant or have had a child during the pandemic, can return, remain, and learn in school in this COVID age, but also beyond. And how do we push together this cultural change and social change that we all spoke about today. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a good rest of your day, or if this was the end of your day, we hope you have a relaxing evening and night. So thank you all.
Thank you.